"Hey, somebody call the VA. We've got a lost robot grandpa here." Laughter erupted, echoing under the scorching midday sun of San Diego. The old man limped forward, his prosthetic leg catching the light, still moving as if he hadn't heard a thing. No one here knew that those frail shoulders had once carried 3 young soldiers through a hail of bullets in Fallujah. All they saw was an old man with a crooked gait, thinking it was a joke. At the corner of the street, a black SUV sat motionless. Inside, a former Navy SEAL officer gripped the steering wheel tight, battlefield memories flooding back. In just a few minutes, the entire site would fall silent and learn the true meaning of respect. Jack Callahan, 72, had once been a United States Marine Corps sergeant. Now he lived alone in a second-floor apartment in Barrio Logan, right by the tracks, where the train horns pierced his sleep night after night. Every morning, he put on a faded shirt, pulled on a baseball cap bearing his old unit insignia, and walked nearly a mile to the VA San Diego Medical Center. His left leg was a titanium prosthetic, each step giving off a steady clack, clack. To him, it was just a normal rhythm. To others, it was something that made them turn and look. Neighbors knew him only as the old man with the robot leg. They nodded hello, he nodded back. Then everyone went their own way. Adults looked at him with a mix of pity and awkwardness, as if they didn't know how to speak to a scar of war. The kids were more curious. Some ran after him to ask why his leg made that sound. Some whispered that he must have been a superhero. Jack only smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying. His apartment was simple. A wall hung with an old photo of him in uniform, and the baseball cap always set neatly on the table. There wasn't much furniture, just a few essentials. He didn't seek busyness, only enough to live and maintain a routine. On his way to the VA, Jack usually passed a large construction site. He had never paid it much attention, only slipping by the drills, the hammers, the smell of cement dust. To him, it was just another stretch of road. But today, the San Diego sun was harsher than usual. The pavement threw heat up to eye level. The air was thick with a metallic smell. Workers in high-visibility vests moved along the scaffolding, shouting to each other. The roar of machinery mingled with laughter and shouts. Jack kept walking, eyes forward. The tap of his prosthetic on the sidewalk blended into the surrounding clamor. People looked at him as always. Some turned away, others held their gaze longer, half curious, half judgmental. He was used to it. For years, that look had repeated at the supermarket, on the bus, in the clinic. No one asked about Fallujah. No one knew, and most didn't want to know. Jack didn't try to explain. He had learned that sometimes silence is a way to protect yourself from questions that don't need answering. The prosthetic wasn't the story, but the ending of a long story he had never told. He adjusted the strap of the canvas bag on his shoulder. Inside were a few items: prescription medication, a small notebook of reminders, and the faded Marine Corps cap, a keepsake he never let out of reach. It was the one thing left from the days when life and death were separated by a single breath. The breeze carried the scorched smell of fresh asphalt. Jack squinted at the road ahead. Only a few hundred steps remained to the VA. At the same time, on the other side of the construction fence, a few eyes began to follow him. Some were harmless curiosity, but others sharper, louder, were about to turn Jack's familiar stretch of road into a noon he would never forget.
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
The baseball cap Jack often carried in his hand was not some cheap giveaway from a fair. Its outer surface had faded, the brim slightly frayed, but on the inside, A line of lettering now worn to a whisper from the past read, "2nd Battalion, the 1st of March-ins, Fallujah 2004. Each time his fingers touched those characters, something inside him went still, as if the entire world outside vanished, leaving only the heat, the gunfire, and the acrid stench of burning smoke. Around his neck, beneath the loose shirt, hung a battered silver dog tag, its edges worn down by the years. That cold piece of metal had once lain against his chest as he ran through the dusty streets of Iraq, when bullets tore through the air just a heartbeat away. Sometimes, in those rare quiet evenings, he would turn it gently between his fingers, not to remember, but to make sure it was still there. 19 years ago in Fallujah, the street he had been assigned to guard turned into hell in a matter of seconds. A remotely triggered IED blast hurled the lead Humvee into the air. Black smoke billowed upward, shards of metal spinning through the air like blades. Jack was thrown to the ground, his ears ringing. But through the haze, he saw 2 young soldiers wounded and trapped between the curb and a staggering corpsman, his uniform soaked in blood. He didn't think. Marines are trained to act before the mind can ask why. He charged in, dragging each one out of the kill zone, shoving them toward the safest cover he could find amid the chaos. On his 3rd run back, he felt a crushing force, and then everything went black. When he woke in a field hospital, his left leg was gone from the knee down. The Silver Star and Purple Heart came later, but Jack never hung them on the wall. He kept them in a small box pushed to the very back of a drawer. For him, the real reward was that those 3 men were still alive. The awkward thank yous, the hurried handshakes during the withdrawal, and the unspoken gratitude, that was what he carried with him. After leaving the service, Jack returned to San Diego. There was no parade, no band, just a veteran with a prosthetic leg, stepping into a world that had mostly forgotten or chosen not to remember. He found work as a mechanic in a small garage. The prosthetic didn't stop him from sliding under cars, his hands covered in grease. That job gave him the sense he was still useful, at least until his health began to turn on him. In recent years, Jack lived quietly, almost invisibly. He avoided veterans' gatherings, declined interviews or recordings. People might see him each morning on his way to the VA, but no one knew the story behind that steady clack-clack. Perhaps he didn't want it to become just another brief spectacle for people to marvel at before forgetting. Sometimes, when passing construction sites or hearing the pounding of hammers, he would briefly recall those old sounds, the cold steel heartbeat of war. But instead of letting the memories pull him under, he would simply shake his head, as if brushing the dust from his mind, and keep walking. The cap, the dog tag, and the sound of his prosthetic striking the sidewalk, these were all that connected him to the man he once was. Everything else, Jack let rest in silence. Few realized that behind that slow, deliberate walk was a past built on courage, loss, and moments that had shaped the rest of his life. But no secret, no matter how tightly kept, stays hidden forever, and for Jack Callahan, that day was closer than he thought. If the men at the construction site today knew what he had done in Fallujah, would they still dare to laugh like that? Take a moment, relax, and comment 1 or "I'm still here" to keep listening. The San Diego midday sun poured down as if it meant to melt the street. Heat from the construction site rolled outward, thick with the smell of hot steel and cement dust. Jack Callahan moved slowly along the cracked sidewalk, the steady clack of his prosthetic leg, blending with the drills, the hammers, the pounding roar of engines. To him, this was just the familiar stretch of road to the VA. But today, that familiar rhythm was cut short by a booming voice, loud enough to rise above the churn of the cement mixer. "Somebody call the VA. He's probably headed to the welfare office for a handout." The voice belonged to Ray Torres, the new foreman, carrying like a mocking command. Laughter erupted instantly from workers up on the scaffolding. One man mimicked Jack's limp, then collapsed to the ground, pretending to cry out as if injured. Another clapped, like he was watching a second-rate circus act. Jack kept his pace. He didn't lift his head, didn't respond. Only his jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck standing out beneath sun-darkened skin. The wind carried whistles and a few crude remarks. None of it was new. He'd heard enough from strangers since leaving the service, but there was something different in their tone today, the collective agreement of a crowd that had found a shared source of entertainment. On the second level of the scaffolding, a figure pretended to stagger, clutching his leg and squealing, "Ow, ow," like a child. The whole group laughed until their faces flushed red. A younger man aimed his phone down at the street, eyes bright with the anticipation of catching a viral TikTok clip. Jack didn't change his stride. He had heard laughter in Fallujah too, but that had been the tense laughter of soldiers who knew they'd just cheated death. This kind of laughter was different. It was hollow, cheap, and worst of all, contagious. Inside the canvas bag on his shoulder, the faded baseball cap lay still. He knew that if he touched it, other images would come flooding back, and that wasn't something he wanted to bring out for these men. Not today. A few other workers, not joining in the joke, began to glance at each other. A faint discomfort crept into some of their expressions, but no one spoke. On a job site, staying silent while someone else is mocked is sometimes considered the safe choice, but that silence is also complicity. Jack walked on, eyes fixed on the road ahead. At his age, he knew well how to choose which battles to stop for. But there are moments when patience is like a dull knife. It doesn't scare anyone. It only makes the hand holding it bleed inside. Less than a block away, behind the dark glass of a Chevy Suburban parked in the shade, another man was watching. He wasn't laughing. He didn't look away. His gaze locked on Jack as if he had just seen a ghost step out of memory. His hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. He remembered every second in Fallujah, remembered Jack charging into gunfire, remembered the blood and the smoke, remembered the feeling of being pulled from the wreck of a burning Humvee. The laughter at the construction site hadn't died down. Ray Torres, emboldened by Jack's lack of reaction, called out again, voice sharp and jeering, "Hey, old man, that machine leg bought at a flea market?" A new burst of laughter erupted. Some workers raised their hands to their mouths, not to stifle the laugh, but to hide their discomfort. A bead of sweat slid from Jack's temple, down his cheek, and onto the strap of his bag. He didn't wipe it away. Just a few more steps, and he'd be out of their sight. Just a few more. But somewhere, the gaze from inside the black Suburban still tracked him, cold and sharp as steel. The man in the car took a long breath, as if a decision had just been made. The wheels began to turn slowly, almost silently. And at that moment, the heavy, stifling midday air of San Diego was about to receive another current, one carrying the scent of military discipline, the cadence of boots in formation, and the presence of someone who knew exactly what honor meant. What would happen when a living witness from Fallujah decided to step out of the shadows and intervene? At the head of the street, beneath the shade of a fig tree spilling its shadow across the pavement, a black Chevy Suburban sat motionless like a block of steel asleep under the midday Sunday. The engine idled softly, its hum just a faint vibration in the heat-thick air. Behind the dark-tinted glass, the eyes of Thomas "Hawk" Hawkins followed Jack Callahan's every step. Hawk didn't need more than a heartbeat to recognize the man. Nearly 2 decades had passed, yet that gait, the limp, with its clack rhythm, and the slight forward tilt of the right shoulder, was etched deep in his memory. More importantly, that gait was the reason he was alive to sit here now. The memories surged back, vivid and untarnished. Fallujah, 2004. A street choked with dust and the smell of gunpowder. Bullets hissed like a swarm of angry bees, shouts mingled with sharp explosions. His unit's Humvee had taken an RPG hit, flipping on its side and catching fire. Hawk, then a SEAL lieutenant commander, was trapped behind the driver's compartment, his left leg numb, his vision blurring from smoke and heat. He remembered the silhouette charging in, not in heavy body armor, just a dust-covered helmet and eyes locked in an unnerving focus. Jack Callahan. His leg already gashed by shrapnel, blood soaking through the fabric, yet he went back into the kill zone 3 times. The first to drag out a young soldier, the second to steady a dazed corpsman, and the third to haul Hawk out of the burning steel shell. Hawk remembered the smell of scorched flesh and hot metal, the grip of Jack's hand clutching his gear straps, pulling him across a street littered with jagged debris. He would never forget that fleeting look they exchanged upon reaching safety, a look between 2 soldiers who knew they had just cheated death. Now death wasn't present here, but something else was testing Jack. The casual cruelty of people. Hawk saw clearly the construction crew mocking him, mimicking his limp, filming for cheap amusement. Each burst of laughter from the sight felt like a dull blade twisting slowly in Hawk's memory. His hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles blanching, tendons rose along his neck taut like cords about to snap. Hawk was not the type to lose his temper easily. Years in special operations had taught him to control his breathing, his heart rate, even his anger. But what he saw now was not something he could let pass. He reached for the phone on the dashboard, his thumbs skimming quickly through contacts until it stopped on a single name. When the line picked up, Hawk spoke briefly. "It's Hawk. Send the team. I'll text you the address." Nothing more, nothing less. The kind of order that needed no explanation. The people on the other end knew that if Hawk called, it mattered. Hanging up, Hawk leaned back in his seat, eyes never leaving Jack. He knew Jack wouldn't create a confrontation on his own. The man had never sought attention or demanded recognition. But Hawk also knew there were moments when silence was no longer humility. It was letting others believe they had the right to humiliate. Out on the street, Jack was nearly out of sight. But Hawk wasn't in a hurry. He knew he had a few minutes before the convoy arrived, enough time to remember one thing. That day in Fallujah, when blood blurred his vision, he had thought he'd never see daylight again. And today, daylight came in the shape of an old man with a prosthetic leg, walking down the street under a blazing Sunday. Inside the vehicle, Hawk flicked a switch, the air conditioner humming to life. Not to cool him, he didn't feel the heat, but to center himself, to prepare for what was about to happen. He pictured the moment his team would appear. No sirens, no bluster, just a silent presence that could change the face of an entire construction site. A thin smile, almost imperceptible, ghosted across Hawk's lips. Not because he found any humor in this, but because he knew one simple truth. The men who had just mocked Jack Callahan were about to learn a lesson in honor one no classroom or labor contract could ever teach them. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part that will leave you in awe. Take a second to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. The deep, muffled rumble of 3 black SUVs echoed down the street like a drumbeat, announcing that something was about to happen. The dust hadn't even settled when the doors swung open almost in unison. 7 men stepped out, synchronized, razor sharp, as if they had just walked off the page of a Special Forces training manual. Dark polo shirts stretched across solid shoulders, neatly fitted tactical pants, boots polished to a gleam. Every step they took carried its own weight, making the entire construction site seem to hold its breath. Hawk led the way. His gaze swept across the crowd like a laser, stopping for no one until it locked onto the face of Ray Torres. No preamble, no warning. Hawk stopped just a few paces away, his voice low but edged like a blade fresh from the whetstone. "Who just insulted Marine Corps Sergeant Jack Callahan?" Ray froze, as if someone had yanked an emergency brake. His mouth worked, but no words came out. A few workers nearby instinctively stepped back, as if trying to separate themselves from the storm gathering in front of them. Hawk didn't let the silence linger. He turned slightly, letting his voice carry across the entire site. "This man saved 3 lives, mine included, in Fallujah. He lost his legs so we could live. And this is how you treat a hero?" No one answered. Even the hammers and drills went silent, as if the entire space had been frozen. One of the younger SEALs, probably the youngest in the group, stepped forward, pulled a phone from his pocket, and held it up. "We've recorded everything, including your laughter." The last words cut into the already tense air like a blade. Ray lowered his head, his face flushing red, unable to look up. Hawk didn't stop there. He turned and began walking toward the end of the street where Jack Callahan still stood, silent like a rock in the middle of a storm. Jack hadn't spoken a word since it all began, his eyes following Hawk and his team with a mixture of disbelief and astonishment. When only a few steps separated them, Hawk suddenly came to attention. The entire SEAL team turned in unison and saluted. It wasn't the mechanical salute given to a superior officer. It was the sacred kind, reserved for someone who had walked through fire, blood, and smoke, and survived to bring the story back. Jack froze. For a moment, it was as if all sound disappeared, leaving only the pounding of his heart in his chest. Slowly, he raised his hand in return. His eyes glistened, but his hand was as steady as it had been the day he stood in formation. A few of the workers bowed their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Others shoved their hands into their pockets, as if ashamed of what they had just witnessed and of letting it happen at all. Overhead, a light breeze swept through, carrying with it the dust of the street and the feeling that honor had just been restored to its rightful place. But Hawk knew, and Jack knew too, this wasn't the end. What had just happened was only the beginning of something much larger. So what will happen when this construction site and the whole town learns the full truth about Jack Callahan? No one expected that a video less than 3 minutes long could ignite a wave of emotion across the United States. From the moment the SEAL team stepped in to protect Jack, the image of him standing silently, not resisting, yet holding on to that calm, proud gaze, struck millions straight to the heart. Within just 24 hours, the video had been shared over 500,000 times, appearing on every platform from Facebook and TikTok to the evening news. Television channels in San Diego opened their broadcasts with the line, "Not all heroes wear capes, but some once wore SEAL uniforms." The story spread quickly, sparking discussions about how society treats its veterans. Many expressed shame upon realizing that they too had sometimes unknowingly overlooked those who had given their youth to defend freedom. Under public pressure, the construction company where Ray Torres worked was forced to issue a public apology, along with a statement announcing his indefinite suspension. The post on the company's Facebook page was bombarded with comments, most demanding that they organize veteran appreciation programs. One account even wrote, "If you want to repair your image, invite Jack to be a moral advisor for all your employees." A week later, Jack received a formal invitation from Lincoln High School, where he had once spoken more than 20 years ago. This time, it was for Veterans Appreciation Week. When he entered the auditorium, he wore no old uniform, no medals, just a light blue shirt, simple khaki pants, and a smile warm enough to fill the room. The speech wasn't long, but every word seemed to pour a quiet strength into the listeners. "Scars don't make me weaker," he said, his voice low yet clear. They remind me that I survived and that I'm still here. Not a whisper stirred, only the sound of deep breaths from hundreds of students. Then applause rose like a wave, swelling and unending. Some teachers discreetly wiped away tears. A few male students pretended to cough to hide the lump in their throats. After the talk, a boy with a prosthetic arm shyly approached. His eyes shone as he looked up at Jack. "I want to be strong like you." Jack bent slightly, resting his calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're already strong. Just keep walking." In that moment, many reached for their phones to take a picture, but hesitated, as if afraid to break the sacred stillness. On the drive home, Jack sat behind the wheel of his old pickup truck and turned the radio on. A DJ was speaking with deep admiration about the seal in the video. Jack smiled. He had never wanted to be the center of attention. But if this story could help someone believe that scars are not the end, then all the noise was worth it. And somewhere, perhaps Hawk, the one who had quietly sent that video to a reporter friend, was telling himself he had done the right thing. But is this truly the end of the story? Or merely the beginning of another journey, one where Jack must face challenges not from the battlefield, but from everyday life itself? What do you think? Can a moving story change the way society sees those who once sacrificed for their country? Under the golden blaze of the late afternoon sun, Jack stood still before the red brick path leading into the Veterans Plaza. Among hundreds of engraved bricks was a new one, gleaming, "Jack Mercer, Navy SEAL, still standing." He gently placed his hand on the inscription, feeling a warmth, as if he were touching the heart of the millions who had followed and stood by him in recent days. This story was not only about an old soldier being defended, but a reminder that courage and dignity always hold value even when the world forgets. If you are hearing this, remember that every scar, whether visible or hidden, is proof of survival and the strength within you. We do not just survive, we are still standing. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and follow so you won't miss the next inspiring story. Who knows? The next one could be yours.